Pack your things, Malik. You're done here. The words don't just echo, they explode. Board Chairman Philip Kramer doesn't hand the box to Dr. Malik Dawson. He slams it onto the conference table so hard, the security camera feed shakes. Live. Unfiltered. Streaming directly to 650 employees across 3 time zones. LibertyNet, Pacific Liberty Bank's internal Slack, is lit up with shocked emojis, rapid-fire comments, and stunned silence. The counter ticks up. 653. 658. 672 viewers. Malik's eyes remain fixed. Calm. But the cardboard box in front of him tells a different story. His Stanford MBA, folded like a forgotten flyer. A photo of his wife and son, glass cracked, facing down. His Executive of the Year plaque, wrapped in a crumpled printout of the latest financial report he authored. The same report that showed a 26% increase in profit over 4 quarters. The same report the board praised, until today. Kramer adjusts his cufflinks. Security will escort you out before end of day. Make sure he doesn't take anything proprietary. The assistant, a young woman barely out of grad school, looks like she's about to be sick. She's still streaming, still recording, still processing what's unfolding in real time. The board members say nothing, but their smirks speak volumes. You were never one of us. Malik doesn't move. He simply lowers his hand to the briefcase at his feet. A simple, black leather case, unassuming, but inside, a titanium folder. And within that, 68 pages of documentation, audio files, email chains, meeting transcripts, all perfectly legal, all perfectly damning. He doesn't open it. Not yet. This isn't a tantrum. This isn't desperation. This is strategy. You see, Malik Dawson didn't walk into this boardroom as a victim. He walked in knowing exactly what was coming. Because 3 months ago, he filed a federal complaint with the Financial Banking Commission. And what's about to happen isn't just justice. It's a reckoning, with the whole world watching. It didn't start with the box. It started long before. Long before the live stream. Long before the cameras. Long before the Friday afternoon firing squad. It began in whispers. In side glances. In subtle silences during boardroom meetings when Dr. Malik Dawson spoke. He was the youngest CEO in the company's 84-year history. And the first black one. A Stanford graduate. A Fulbright scholar. A man who had once been called visionary by the Wall Street Journal. But none of that mattered here. Not to Philip Kramer. Not to the majority white board who preferred their leaders to look, talk, and dress a certain way. They smiled in the annual reports. They praised him in press interviews. But in closed-door sessions, the tone was always different. Malik's leadership style, it's just not traditional, someone would say. His presence feels disruptive, another would whisper. Clients want someone they can relate to. Relate to. That word was used often. It was code, and everyone in the room understood it. It didn't mean competence. It didn't mean credentials. It meant whiteness. Malik noticed early on how his ideas, data-backed, forward-thinking, were met with polite nods and quiet dismissal. How his initiatives to expand lending access for underserved communities were labeled as risky. How he was told to tone down the energy in meetings. How he was always asked to explain himself, to prove himself, to dial it back. Other executives came to work as themselves. Malik came armored. Always polished. Always over-prepared. Always ready to fight an invisible war just to be heard. One meeting, 2 months before the firing, sticks out. Malik had proposed a digital expansion plan targeted at first-time homebuyers in marginalized communities. He had the numbers, the demand forecast, even the rollout strategy. The room stayed silent. Then Kramer leaned back and said with a smile, "Let's not push the culture too fast. We don't want to scare the base. The base. Their favorite term for the way things have always been. For the system they were too afraid, or too privileged, to change. Malik didn't push back that day. He just nodded, made a note in his folder, and kept going. But he remembered. Every glance. Every word. Every warning that he was too much, too bold, too different. He never fit in. Because the system was never built for him to belong. And now the system would have to answer for that. It only took one clip. 15 seconds. Captured by accident. Posted by instinct. Deja Carter, a marketing intern no one had noticed before today, had been in the hallway, phone in hand, earbuds in. She was on her way to refill her water bottle when she heard the voices rise. The tone in Kramer's voice stopped her cold. Something told her to hit record. She didn't mean to become the match that would light a firestorm. She just knew what she was hearing wasn't right. Her phone caught the box being slammed. Kramer's voice barking orders. The silence from the board. And Malik's stillness. She uploaded the clip to her private Instagram story, tagging it simply. "This ain't leadership. This is discrimination." Her followers, mostly friends from Howard University, shared it immediately. Then it landed on TikTok, and Twitter, and YouTube. The hashtags followed like lightning. Hashtag Justice for Malik. Hashtag Banking While Black. Hashtag Pacific Liberty Leak. By the time Malik reached the lobby, the video had already hit 23,000 views. By the time he stepped into the parking lot, it had crossed 100,000. By the time he opened his car door, it was at 320,000 and climbing. People weren't just watching. They were enraged. Comment after comment poured in. "This man grew your profits by 26% and you fire him?" Imagine being that threatened by black excellence. "We see you, Pacific Liberty Bank. And we are watching." Influencers began reposting. Professors from HBCUs stitched the video with commentary. Civil rights groups shared it to their mailing lists. In less than an hour, it was on the homepage of Reddit, the top trending story on Black Twitter, and embedded in a viral thread by a journalist from the Washington Post. The internet moved like a tidal wave. No spin. No delay. No damage control could keep up. What had started as corporate humiliation became public accountability. And once the story belonged to the people, there was no taking it back. Pacific Liberty Bank had made one crucial mistake. They assumed the world would look away. That no one would care what happened behind closed doors. But this time, the doors were wide open. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. And just like that, the temperature in the building changed. 8 figures stepped out. Charcoal suits. Confident strides. Each one carrying a briefcase like it was a weapon of precision. At the front of the pack was Angela Burke, senior partner at Weston & Burke LLP. Former federal prosecutor. Known in legal circles as the closer. She didn't need to speak loudly. Her presence filled rooms without a single wasted word. Behind her, a team handpicked for this moment. A financial regulation specialist. A Title VII discrimination expert. A civil rights attorney trained at Columbia. Even a data analyst with a background in forensic auditing. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to deliver consequences. As they walked past reception, a hush fell over the floor. Employees who had just watched Malik Dawson be humiliated hours earlier now stood frozen, watching something new. Not a firing, but a reckoning. Angela led the group straight to the executive conference room, heels tapping like a metronome for justice. She didn't knock. She opened the door and walked in like she owned the place. The board members barely had time to rise before folders hit the table. Sick. Numbered. Tapped. "This is a courtesy," she said, setting her briefcase down with quiet control. My firm represents Dr. Malik Dawson in federal proceedings filed under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Philip Kramer blinked. What proceedings? This is a personnel matter. Angela didn't blink back. Not anymore. The team began distributing documents, each one marked confidential, each containing timelines, quotes, internal emails. All perfectly legal. All gathered over the past 3 months. Malik had not come alone. He had built his own boardroom army. And now they were here. With federal complaints. With media pressure. With social momentum. And, most importantly, with truth. This wasn't just about Malik's job anymore. It was about the system that tried to erase him. And the professionals trained to hold it accountable. Angela folded her arms and let the silence sit heavy on the room. You can read the details for yourselves. But make no mistake. She looked directly at Kramer. This is your moment of accountability. Choose wisely. Angela Burke didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The documents in front of each board member said more than enough. Let's start with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, she said calmly, flipping open the first tab in her own copy. Unlawful termination based on race, supported by both circumstantial and direct evidence. Kramer's face tightened. Angela continued without pause. Then we have Section 1981. Interference with the right to make and enforce contracts. That includes denying Malik Dawson the right to fulfill his executive contract because of racial bias. She let that settle for a beat. Next, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. During Malik's tenure, he pushed for fairer lending practices, policies that were shut down without valid reasoning. We now have internal documentation showing those decisions were motivated by concerns over changing the bank's image. That's discrimination. Murmurs rippled around the table. Angela's colleague, Marcus Ellison, a calm man with steel-gray hair and a sharp memory, stepped forward. We also have documented retaliation, he added, placing a smaller binder next to Kramer. Mr. Dawson filed 2 internal complaints about discriminatory comments made by board members. Instead of addressing those, you fast-tracked a plan to remove him. Retaliation against a whistleblower, Angela echoed. That falls under federal protection statutes. And it carries criminal penalties. The weight of those 2 words, criminal penalties, shifted the air in the room. Suddenly, the board wasn't facing bad press. They were staring down federal consequences. Angela tapped a highlighted paragraph in the packet. These aren't just mistakes. They're patterns. Coordinated, intentional, and systemic. We have the timestamps, the call logs, the emails, the internal memos where Malik's name is crossed out in discussions about community outreach and replaced with someone more aligned. Another pause. And the best part, she said, raising her eyes to the board. All of it was recorded in a one-party consent state. Which means every word you said in those meetings is admissible. Kramer leaned back in his chair, suddenly smaller than he'd ever appeared. This is not about cancel culture. It's not about a misunderstanding. This is about a federally protected executive, removed for not being what you expected. Not who your donors were used to. Not who fit your mold. Angela stepped back. And now, the mold breaks. The federal government does not move quickly. But when it moves with weight. And Pacific Liberty Bank had finally triggered that weight. Angela Burke didn't even have to raise her voice. Because the timing was perfect. As she laid out the charges one by one, phones around the table began to buzz, almost in sync. Philip Kramer checked his first. Then his second. Then his third. Every message read some version of the same thing. We have a situation. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco had called. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency had scheduled an urgent compliance review. The FDIC had sent a notice of examination. All within the last 90 minutes. The regulators weren't watching anymore. They were acting. Angela turned to Malik, nodding slightly. He knew what that meant. The dominoes were falling. Malik had filed his complaint through the proper federal channels. He didn't go to the press. He didn't post on social media. He trusted the law. And now the law was doing what it was designed to do: protect. Regulators don't just review policies. They audit every loan, every approval, every denial, every percentage point of discrepancy between white and non-white applicants. And Pacific Liberty Bank had a pattern. The data had always been there. But now, it was being read by people who knew exactly what they were looking for. Kramer tried to speak. "We've passed every audit before," Angela interrupted, not with anger, but with finality. "You passed because no one was looking close enough. They are now." Her colleague, Marcus, opened a folder marked confidential. Regulatory data. "The rejection rate for black applicants is 2.5 times higher than white applicants with the same credit profile," he said. "Hispanic applicants are delayed on average 14 days longer." Loan officers used coded language in internal memos. "That's a violation of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Your lending map shows redlining patterns in 3 zip codes." The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It was scared. Because when the regulators show up, it's not just your job on the line. It's your license, your charter, your ability to exist as a financial institution. And now, for the first time since Malik walked into that room, the board understood. This wasn't just about discrimination. It was about survival. Angela Burke placed one final folder on the table. It was thinner than the rest. No tabs. No highlighter marks. Just one sheet of paper at the top, centered and bold. Settlement Framework. Option 1/Option 2. She looked around the room. Slowly. Deliberately. "This is the part where you choose your ending," she said. Her tone was even, but every word landed with the weight of a gavel. Option 1. Full compliance. Immediate reinstatement of Dr. Malik Dawson as CEO, with expanded authority and a 3-year contract protected by federal oversight. No one blinked. Angela continued. $2.5 million in settlement funds, directed not to Malik personally, but toward financial literacy programs for underserved communities across the city. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all employees, quarterly, for 2 years. A restructured board to ensure 40% minority representation within 6 months. And a public apology. From this board. Live-streamed. Unscripted. She let the silence sit. Then flipped the page. Option 2, she said softly. Full federal litigation. Her colleague Marcus stepped forward. If you choose option 2, discovery begins immediately. All internal communications over the past 5 years, emails, memos, call logs, will become public record. You'll be subpoenaed, deposed, sworn under oath. Media coverage will follow every step. Live reporting from federal court. Interviews with former employees. Think pieces about race, power, and legacy. Angela added, the FDIC will continue its investigation. The OCC may suspend your charter. If they do, this bank closes within 90 days. No deposit insurance. No lending capacity. No institution. Kramer opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Angela leaned forward, her voice just above a whisper. This is not about saving face anymore. This is about saving what's left. Harrison, the only board member who hadn't spoken until now, cleared his throat. If we choose option 1, will the federal case go away? No, Angela said. But the penalties will be reduced. The process will be controlled. You'll survive. And if we choose option 2? You won't. There were no raised voices. No outbursts. Just the cold realization that power had shifted. The board had played politics. Now they were playing against the law. And the law never blinks. The silence didn't last. It cracked, quietly at first. A shuffle of papers. A cough from the far end of the table. Then, finally, a voice. "I wasn't part of that decision," said Emily Chong, the only Asian American board member, her voice calm but brittle. Philip Kramer turned his head sharply. Her eyes didn't flinch. "I never supported terminating Malik. I thought it was rushed, and I said so in the January meeting." Angela Burke glanced at Malik, who remained composed, listening, observing. Another board member, Martin Ellison, cleared his throat. "I didn't know about the complaint," he added quickly. "Had I known there was a pending federal filing, I would have advised we slow things down." Angela didn't say a word. She let them talk. Because now the unraveling had begun. They weren't defending each other anymore. They were defending themselves. "I just followed the majority vote," said Dana Callahan, her voice cracking. "I didn't lead this." Kramer slammed his palm against the table. "This isn't helping." Angela raised an eyebrow. "This is accountability," she replied. Board members started pulling out their phones. Some were texting their personal attorneys. Others were scanning the settlement framework like their futures depended on it, because they did. These weren't villains. They were executives. Used to closed doors, private meetings, and quiet resolutions. But nothing about this moment was quiet. Behind them, Lisa, the executive assistant, was still streaming, still capturing every whisper, every denial, every fractured alliance. And the comments were rolling in. "They're turning on each other. Watch how quick the loyalty disappears." Malik sat silent for months while they planned this, and now they're falling apart in real time. Angela stepped forward. "Let me be clear," she said. "The federal government doesn't care who started it. They care who signed off on it. Intent doesn't erase impact." Malik finally spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Some of you looked me in the eye and said you had my back," he said softly. "Now you're just trying to cover your own." He looked at Kramer last. "Which one are you?" Kramer didn't answer. But his silence said everything. Truth doesn't stay buried forever. Not when people start remembering. Not when they're finally given permission to speak. Within 24 hours of the live stream, the stories started coming in. Emails. Voicemails. Messages marked confidential. Angela Burke's team set up a secure reporting portal. And almost immediately, the inbox began to overflow. First came the interns. Past and present. "I was told to dress more corporate, but only after I wore my natural curls," one wrote. Another, a board member, asked if I was part of a diversity quota. I didn't even know what to say. Then the security staff. Maurice Jenkins, head of the evening shift for 7 years, submitted a sworn affidavit. He remembered the looks. The tone changes. The way Malik was escorted into meetings as if he didn't belong there. "They called it protocol," Maurice wrote. "But I've never seen that same protocol used on anyone else." Then came a voice no one expected. Dana Schmidt, a mid-level finance manager. White. 10 years with the company. Never outspoken. She submitted a 5-page statement with detailed notes and dates. "I used to sit in meetings where Malik's presentations were ignored until someone else repeated the same points. I saw board members openly mock his idea for a financial literacy program, only to pitch it themselves a month later. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to be next." Her final line read, "I'm not proud of my silence. But I won't be silent now." Angela read every line aloud in the next board session. No dramatics. No interpretation. Just the words. As they were written. One by one, the board members sat back in their chairs. And one by one, the memories began to shift. What they had once brushed off as minor moments, passing comments, quiet dismissals, subtle exclusions, were now patterns. Documented, dated, verified. This wasn't about one bad meeting. It wasn't even about one bad decision. It was about a culture that told Malik he didn't belong from the very start. A culture so comfortable in its own bias, it called him unqualified, even after he delivered historic profits. Now the culture was on trial. And the jury was watching live. The conference room was quiet, but outside that room, 125,000 people were watching. Not figuratively. Literally. The live stream had gone viral. Local news outlets had picked it up. Then, national ones. And now, live footage of Pacific Liberty Bank's emergency board meeting was being rebroadcast by CNN, MSNBC, even Bloomberg Business. No one expected this. Not Kramer. Not the board. Certainly not the assistant who had forgotten to stop the feed. But now, the world wasn't just listening. They were waiting. Waiting to see if a group of powerful executives would do what was right. Or protect what was left of their reputations. Angela Burke stood at the head of the room, settlement document in hand. You've heard the evidence. You've read the testimonies. You've felt the public response. She let the last word echo. Now it's time to vote. One by one, the board members were called by name. Martin Ellison went first. I vote yes, to accept the settlement and reinstate Dr. Dawson. Emily Chong followed. Yes. Dana Callahan paused, her hands shaking. I vote yes. A shift rippled through the room. Angela nodded to the next. Yes. Yes. Another yes. Then it was Kramer's turn. He hesitated. The cameras caught every twitch in his jaw. Every flicker of ego trying to survive. He looked at Malik, who hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. He didn't need to. The facts had already spoken for him. The people had amplified them. And now, history was watching. Kramer looked down. Then back up. I vote yes. It was unanimous. Angela stepped forward, her voice steady. Let the record show that Pacific Liberty Bank's board has unanimously accepted the terms of the federal settlement. Dr. Malik Dawson will resume his position as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. The comment section exploded. He's back. Justice. They had no choice but to fold. Malik stood. Not with triumph, but with quiet resolve. He looked around the room. At the people who had doubted him. At the system that tried to erase him. And at the cameras broadcasting every second. Let's get back to work, he said. And just like that, the story entered a new chapter. Not about the fall, but the return. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen overnight. Not in business. Not in community. Not after everything that had been exposed. But Pacific Liberty Bank didn't try to skip the work. They leaned in. On Monday morning, Dr. Malik Dawson walked back through the same glass doors where security had once been ordered to escort him out. This time, they held the door open. Maurice, the veteran guard who had stood by that day, nodded with respect. Welcome back, Dr. Dawson, he said quietly. And something in the air shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't celebratory. It was solemn, but hopeful. Inside the building, things looked the same. But the energy was different. Because change had begun. The first reform came fast. A new Executive Equity Council, chaired by Malik himself, composed of department heads from across all backgrounds, race, gender, tenure, age. They weren't just there to advise. They had decision-making power. Every policy, from hiring to marketing to product development, had to pass through this council for equity review. Next came transparency. Employee feedback was no longer collected through anonymous surveys that disappeared into silence. It was read aloud, reviewed quarterly, and published internally with full accountability. Promotions were tracked for fairness. Salaries were audited for equity. And in every town hall meeting, Malik showed up. Not just as CEO, But, as a listener, he stood in front of his team and said the words most leaders avoid. "We got it wrong. Now we make it right." Then came the public-facing changes. Pacific Liberty's homepage now featured community partnerships. Their new lending campaign was designed by a Black-owned marketing firm. They expanded small business loans into neighborhoods they had once overlooked. And customers noticed. In just 4 months, new account openings among minority communities grew by 270%. Community leaders began referring clients again. Nonprofits returned their calls. People who had sworn off banks started giving this one a second chance. Because when you name the problem, take accountability, and follow it with action, you don't just recover a brand. You restore belief. Malik didn't rebuild alone, but he led by example. And in doing so, he turned a public humiliation into a blueprint for institutional rebirth. The kind that doesn't just polish the surface, but rebuilds the foundation. Some people believe that silence is the price of survival. That if you want to succeed in corporate America, you have to take the insults. Ignore the double standards. Swallow the microaggressions and say, "Thank you for the opportunity." But Dr. Malik Dawson proved otherwise. He proved that dignity and strategy can walk side by side. That resilience doesn't mean submission. It means choosing your moment and making it count. The lesson is simple. You don't fight exclusion by trying harder to fit in. You fight it by refusing to accept that you were ever the problem. Malik didn't raise his voice when they tried to strip him of his title. He didn't shout back in that boardroom. He didn't storm out. He documented. He prepared. He built a case with facts, not feelings. And then, when the time was right, he let the truth speak for itself. Because real change doesn't come from rage alone. It comes from action. From knowing the law. From knowing your worth. And from knowing that silence is not the only option. Malik's story is not just about a bank. It's not just about a racist board or a broken system. It's about what happens when someone dares to say, "Not today. Not this time. Not me." It's about how one voice, backed by evidence and community, can hold power to account. And it's a reminder that justice is not always loud. Sometimes, it walks into the room quietly, carrying a titanium folder. Now, here's where we turn the camera to you. Have you ever been in a room where your presence was questioned, not because of your performance, but because of who you are? Have you ever stayed silent, when everything in you wanted to speak? If Malik's story moved you, then let it also challenge you. Challenge you to speak up, to document, to stand firm, and to never, ever let anyone convince you that your silence is professionalism. Because silence, in the face of injustice, is not maturity. It's permission. So speak, act, organize, prepare. Let Malik's story be a spark for your own. If you've experienced workplace discrimination, share your story in the comments. You never know who you might inspire. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in stories that expose, empower, and transform. Because we're not just telling stories here. We're building a movement. One voice, one truth, one reckoning at a time.